ESPN FC Daily is back with you. It's a second edition on Monday. All of the games from today are done. Kay Marie and Luis Miguel Echegaray back with you. We've just witnessed the USA and Wales playing out a 1-1 draw in Group B. Tim Weah put the USA ahead in the first half of action. And then late stages of the second half, Gareth Bale leveled things out with a penalty. Your initial thoughts on what we saw today, Luis?
Kay Marie! Wow. Well, I got to say, it was the best match in terms of atmosphere, I think, since the tournament has started. Obviously, it's still early days, only the fourth match in contention, but it was a really great atmosphere at the beginning. Obviously, you saw the Welsh fans celebrating the return of their national team for the first time since 1958. The USMNT, of course, returning after missing out on 2018, the first time since 1986. So there was a lot at stake, right? I thought, Kay, it was a game of two halves. The USMNT were almost perfect in the first 45 minutes. Wales really didn't have much to offer. They were so separated, possession-based. They couldn't feed it to Gareth Bale. Tim Ream, Zimmerman were excellent. Anthony Robinson, excellent. Great goal from Tim Weah, as you mentioned. And then in the second half, Wales were like, we got to change our strategy. We got to do something different. They were more physical. They were more direct. And this is the issue, Kay, and we've been talking about this before taping. The USMNT usually, they're so good, right? And I hate to do this, but because they're so young, sometimes that shows. They're eager to demonstrate their energy and their will. And that usually runs out in the 60th minute. Overall, I think actually it was a fair result because the USMNT didn't do what they did in the first half. And now you got to say the happier of these teams is England. What do you think?
Oh, of course, absolutely. They're the winners today in this group, aren't they? In more ways than one. It's interesting you said that about the US, eager, young. I think the disciplinary record in this game showed it as well with some of those yellow cards that they received. But tell me, before the game, when Greg Berhalter put out his 11, were you happy with it?
Yeah, I think overall it was a solid 11. I was a little surprised about Brendan Aronson, but I understand it's kind of the same mentality from Greg Berhalter that Gareth Southgate does with the Bukayo Saka, Phil Foden conversation, right? If Aronson doesn't start, you can give him like 25 minutes and he can really put an impact on the game. But overall, it's pretty much self-explanatory. A back four. I thought Anthony Robinson was excellent. I thought Tim Ream and Walker Timmermans were very good. And obviously that trifecta in the middle with Yunus Musa, the wonderful chess player that is Tyler Adams, everything he does is just so smart, and Weston McKennie. But to your point, McKennie, I thought was a little bit, he was very lucky actually because a more disciplined or restrictive referee probably would have been harsher on him. That first tackle that got him a yellow was very tough. But overall, the first 11 looked good. Way on one side, of course, Pulisic and feeding George Sargent. But, it's tough to figure out what they did right in the second half, because I really think the substitutions probably should have come in earlier. Did you like the first 11? I mean, overall, they're a really young team, Kay, so it's very difficult to see who could fit best as they return to the World Cup. And for the majority of them, their first ever.
Yeah, I feel as though there was definitely a lot of optimism and excitement when we saw that 11. And we saw, obviously, we're going to see the chemistry between Ream and Robinson. We know the MMA. I was surprised, though, that McKennie and Dest just seemed, okay, fit to start.
Yeah.
Obviously, so that was interesting to see what was going to happen there. Josh Sargent getting the nod up top, as you've said. But obviously, on top of this as well, remember, Wales were going to have to react in this second half too. And they've got big tournament. Yes, okay, when it comes to the World Cup, it's the 50s that they're last there. But in terms of the recent Euros, they've got this big tournament experience under their belts now. They can be savvy. They know what they need to do. So it looks as though they didn't panic. They let things sit. They probably had a good chat. Well, they obviously did have a good chat at halftime. And they came back out. And as you said, it was two different halves. The US with the first half, Wales with the second half. And then, yes, obviously, US hearts undone. Shaka Hislop coming in at the perfect time right now to talk about this. So, Shaka, now that you're here, might go backwards a bit on this game here. Gareth Bale with that penalty. Matt Turner, you heard it hit his gloves as it went in. It was so powerful. As a goalkeeper, was there any way he would have stopped that?
No. For Matt Turner to save that, he would have had to guess. He would have had to be out of position. And up against somebody like Gareth Bale, easily the most experienced player on the park. He's done this wherever he's been. He's done this on world football's biggest stages. And it showed. Absolutely no panic, well struck penalty. And as much as Turner gets a slight finger on it, From a goalkeeper perspective, nothing you can do about those.
Okay, and also, just so we can go to the other goal with Tim Weah, how wonderful to see Tim Weah doing this for the US, Shaka.
It really was a very well taken goal. In a half that the US dominated possession, but Wales were happy just to sit back and soak up pressure. And then the odd opportunity, or the odd occasion that Wales goes on the attack, they give the ball away, and you see US, and LMU was talking about the youth and the pace of this US team on the counter-attack, finally found space in that Welsh defence that they'd been looking for all game long. Christian Pulisic with a great run, well-timed run. Nico Williams on the left-hand side deciding to try to stay with Weah for some strange reason, could get nowhere close, and a really comfortable finish for Weah. And US went into the half deservedly leading, and in all honesty, probably deserved to be even further ahead.
Yeah, absolutely right. The only thing I'll add, Kay, is the point that you brought on, by the way, which is something that, because it was a game of two halves, unfortunately, what happens when you're a young side, and I hate to beat this drum, but you have to, because the eagerness from a young American side can show in moments when they don't have the ball, and so they lose a bit of composure. Wales, to your point, Kay, they have enough experience to know what to do here, because in the first half, it's got to be said, from a possession-based perspective, they were horrific, and they didn't want to change their play from the back system. Daniel James and Gareth Bale were too far apart. There was no connection in the midfield, and I think it was really good for them in the second half to say, look, let's bring in Kiefer Moore. Let's bring a strong forward that can also drop and feed, and let's just be physical and let's take advantage. And that's how they got the penalty, really. They were just being more direct, and the Americans couldn't cope. Fantastic penalty from Gareth Bale.
I think what you saw in that first half is a lot about the psychology of the first games in a World Cup. Unless you're coming up against who is roundly recognized as the weakest team in the group, you're generally not playing to lose. And I think that's what you saw from Wales. A team trying not to lose the opening game of the tournament. For the US, with this youth and LME, as you rightly point out, and inexperience, they recognize Wales kind of sitting back, being pragmatic, and that fed into the natural kind of tempo of their own game. So they played on the front foot, and they took the game to Wales. And then, as you mentioned, go into the break at halftime, 1-0 up. Wales, again, recognizing that this is not a game you can afford to lose. And if they continued as they were in the first half, they could not get their way back into it. So they had to change tactic. They go from what was a hybrid five at the back with one defender kind of giving liberty to step out on occasion, but more times than not five, to having their two wing backs play higher up the park, to pressing the US a little bit higher up. And then the only complaint, or the other side to that same coin, is from the US, without that experience, without somebody in midfield, just to put their foot on the ball, slow the game down, take control of the tempo a little bit, the game played at that higher tempo. US are 1-0 up. That higher tempo serves the team who's trailing a whole lot better. And that's what you got. You got Wales getting their way back into the game, rash challenge to bring the penalty. And as I mentioned, the coolest man, most experienced man on the park stepping up. And in the end, it's a point that I think both would have taken before a ball was kicked. But if the US, in that first 45, you think, man, we deserved a whole lot more. If you're the Welsh, you're probably thinking, if that game had gone on for another 5 or 6 minutes on top of the 9 injury time minutes that you had.
You wanted more, Shaka? You wanted more?
No.
Oh my God, too much.
I'm just saying, if you're the Welsh, you're probably thinking, if it goes on anymore, we might have gotten something out of this. But to that point, we've had more than our fair share of minutes of football today. Goodness me.
I think there's a competition to see how much added time we can have in each of these games. Shaka, you were talking about experience there, and I know, Luis, you were talking about focus. And Shaka, maybe from experience, you can tell us why this is happening to the US. As a stat that they've conceded 15 goals in the final 15 minutes of World Cup matches, which is the most in any 15-minute block for the team. Why do they have this trouble conceding goals late on?
I just think you look at the youth, you look at the inexperience of this US team. They prefer to play on the front foot. They prefer to play with pace. And at times, they are missing that experienced midfielder. Somebody just to put their foot on the ball, as I mentioned, slow things down, try to take some of the momentum away from the opposition. US doesn't have anybody like that in their midfield or on their bench, in actual fact. So therefore, they play a game that comes natural to them, which is to continue to attack, to play a high-tempo game. And that's when I think, especially when you're defending a lead, that's when that experience you miss most. Or it doesn't even necessarily need to be to be a midfielder. It just needs to be someone in the park who has that understanding around the game. If the Welsh were 1-0 up, you could look to Gareth Bale to maybe drop into midfield, to slow things down, to be the one to be shouting instructions. And I just don't think that the US has that player. That player in terms of personality, maybe it's Christian Pulisic. But again, that's just not his natural game.
Yeah, excellent from Shaka. The only thing that I'll add, by the way, Kay, is that the best way to defend when you don't have the ball is you do it thanks to the first person who has to defend, which is your striker. And they don't have. I mean, George Sargent is very willing, obviously, that we've talked about Ricardo Pepi not being part of this squad. They need somebody that's very smart, holding the ball, pressing from up front. And that's another thing they don't have. And that's an issue.
Louise, who do you think the leader is, or who should their leader be in the US team?
It should be Tyler Adams. It is Tyler Adams. It's great to see him being the captain, because the thing about Tyler Adams is he's kind of like what they say about Sergio Busquets, right? If you watch Busquets, you don't find him, but if you watch the game, you find Busquets, quiet leader. That's Tyler Adams. He's always indicating where to go. I think Pulisic is the emotional leader, the one that's kind of taken the USMNT on a whole level. But then the other one I think I would say is you have to, if you have a squad where you only have 3 30-plus-year-olds, you have to rely on them for veteran experience in the dressing room and beyond. Tim Ream, for example, he's been fantastic for Fulham as of late. He had a very good 45 minutes, and you could even say in the second as well, minus some mishaps. But he should also be a big voice, because those 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, they need to hear from you. I know it might sound like a cliche, but it's so important to have a balance of youth, talent, and old age veteran experience that can say, I know what it's like to have the chips down. Let's wake up, let's pick up. And also, I'm such a believer in having a leader from the back, just seeing the field in front of you. I mean, Shaka, I'm sure you can agree. Sometimes I like it when you have a goalkeeper or center backs that say to the entire team, guys, let's pick up, let's, find out where you need to be, find out where to recover the ball, etc. So to me, those are the leaders that need to happen.
Thank you very much for watching ESPN FC on YouTube. For more highlights, analysis, and exclusive content, be sure to subscribe.